Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer joins me today to talk Samcodes, malaria and beneficiation. Welcome, Martin.
Hi, Ashley.
Now, to kick off, South Africa has created a set of mineral reporting codes that seem to be extremely popular internationally.
Yeah, I think that we should be proud of what has been developed around our codes for public reporting on mineral issues, on mining issues, because huge amounts of money are invested in what is value in the ground. And if it's not possible, if it's not possible to measure that properly, there is hesitancy in investment. So I get competent persons and competent valuers who are prepared to put their names to the efficacy of these particular assets, which are so deep underground. It takes a lot of nerve sometimes to invest in mining, because it's not as if there's stock in a stockroom. It's not visible, and we have seen overstatement. We've seen overstatement of assets. We saw it in Mozambique, which has led to issues in the SEC in New York. We've seen overstatement of platinum assets, which then just had to be left sterile, even though they were sold at a fortune. So you don't want that happening in the industry. And you can see that these Samcodes are being well managed by the professions and funded by the professions, which is quite noble. And seeing to this whole issue that goes back to the 90s, they've progressed, and it gets better, it gets more credible as they go forward. And now we see that there will be a visit here by the Chinese in October, coming to see what happens in South Africa with these codes, how accurately this whole system works. And the liaison with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is very, very important, because the Stock Exchange has these panel of writers that actually work on all this information, so that investors at least have got access to competent persons reports and competent valuer reports. And if it's in oil and gas, they've also included that, which could become more prevalent in South Africa. We see a company listed in Australia which is looking to work on a gas find off the Western Cape. So these accurate measurements and accurate public statements, probably, it's not going to be the be-all and end-all, but at least it's a strong guide and it safeguards investors.
Now, malaria, the single greatest dampener on the African economy, is now being tackled by mining companies.
Yeah, it's incredible that the mining companies are prepared to try and achieve the United Nations goals on sustainability, and particularly the Goal 3, where health and safety should be across the whole population, down into the young people as well. And we know that malaria, when they start giving you the figures, it is really devastating, and it's worst in Africa. I know that illegal mining taking place in Colombia and South America has suddenly resulted in huge upsurge in malaria cases, because people have to go into the frontier, as it were, to try and look for metals and minerals. And this is when they come across the mosquito, which can be devastating, as we see in Africa. But these mining companies, Glencore in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that is where this is most concentrated, they have gone on a holistic approach across wide areas. And really, it seems that the methods used are very effective in bringing this down very, very fast. We see AngloGold Ashanti in Ghana, protecting like 1 million people, because they more than that, but they treat edifices, they treat buildings on a regular basis to keep the mosquitoes out, and it works. And you see that the statistics of people that are reporting to hospitals just plummeting as a result of these activities. And then even closer by here in Mozambique, we see South 32 at the Moselle aluminium smelter. They're also taking action to try and control it, at least to protect their employees and also their contractors. So this has an impact. As they were saying, it actually multiplies across a region, because you are destroying larvae that would also have an impact in other countries. And in that way, you can bring down the scourge quite quickly. And it's great that mining companies under the International Council for Mining and Metallurgy, ICMM, are prepared to do this and work with the United Nations on achieving their goals to get rid of malaria.
Now, South Africa's Deputy Mineral Resources Minister has ceased prospect in zinc and fuel cell beneficiation.
Yes, it was interesting to hear him talk at Junior Indaba, where he spoke glowingly about the potential to develop the economy of the Northern Cape through its zinc deposits, which are pretty substantial. We know that they have been there for a long time. We know that Anglo American owned those assets. They didn't actually maneuver them as well as they should. There were certain technical issues and also market issues at the time. But we see a different market for zinc at the moment. And we know that Vedanta has gone in there and they're bringing the mentality that you have in India, where you add value to everything. You know, these are your minerals and metals. You try not to send anything out that is raw and cheap, and you try and add value. And they're even talking about fertilizer possibilities there. So they're going the full hog on zinc, which is really pleasing the Deputy Minister who's from that area. So he wants to see it develop. But also he spoke about fuel cells, and all of a sudden, you know, we've got this big conference in the United States at the moment on fuel cells. We see a lot of politicians there. It would be interesting to see whether there's any South African representative there, because fuel cells can be a real boon for us. And it is not around the corner, because when you use fuel cells, you've got to have hydrogen infrastructure. And if you've got hydrogen infrastructure, you've got to have a lot of cooperation with the government. And we see that government cooperation in places like Germany. You see it in Japan. There's a lot of cooperation. You see it in California as a sort of an isolated area in America, not across the United States. And it would be beautiful if we could see it here. You know, what about doing some hydrogen infrastructure here? Even if they start in the mining areas where you've got certain equipment that can be powered by fuel cells, you know, underground equipment, surface equipment, they should possibly consider it even as a demonstration, because if you've got equipment moving in the same area all the time, you can easily have a hydrogen source. So it would be great to expand this. But what really pleased me is that I'm hearing very authoritatively that the Chinese are moving flat out on fuel cells. And a guy said to me yesterday, we should take a trip to China, because he said he went into this one factory. He said it seems to take South Africans a longer time to cut the lawn of a soccer field than it takes these Chinese to put up a factory. Once they take up a decision, and the government provided 50% incentives, and the next minute, he said electric vehicles that were battery driven, they take the battery out, they put the fuel cell in. He said he looked down, there were 400 vehicles in this factory that are fuel cell vehicles, and he says if China carries on like this, you know, this is going to be a big thing for platinum, because fuel cells require platinum catalysis. And that would be fantastic if we can really get it going once and for all, because there's been so much talk on fuel cells, but we need that hydrogen infrastructure, and that's always the inhibiting factor. But you can see that if China takes us up, I think it'll lower the cost of fuel cells for the world, and that'll be great for our platinum industry.
Thanks for speaking with us, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Sashni.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.